Welcome to the Fangled Cast, brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand. Hello, welcome back to the Fangled Cast. So glad you could join us for another conversation with an extraordinary guy. Today we're going to talk about graphic designers and really the difference between a kid who's got a copy of Photoshop and Illustrator and a true designer, and how that can affect in a positive way our goal, which is always to create voracious advocates for brands, the work beyond the sale. So today I want to introduce you to my secret weapon, who I probably shouldn't be doing this podcast with because I don't want people to know so I can get all of his time when I've got projects to go. But this is Burns Brady. He's one of the co-founders and managing partner of Brandosity, which is one of the best design and strategy firms that I've ever worked with. And I just want to give you a couple minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself, Burns, and say hello to the audience.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And by the way, good morning. As Andrew had shared, I'm one of the founding partners in Brandosity. And basically Brandosity, which came about from the merging of two words, branding and velocity. And basically the thought process there is that we are able to bring together the art and science of branding. And what that means is there is a strategic side to every brand, and there is a visual graphic branding side to brand. So that is our thought process. And basically, we want to make sure when we come into meet with the client that their brand is clearly defined, or help them to define that before they get to a point of tactical application and presenting that brand in the marketplace.
Yeah, one of the key things that you brought up, which I'm constantly harping on with clients, the biggest cause of failure in the marketing world, in my opinion, besides hiring people who really aren't qualified and don't have the experience to do what they're doing, is the people who jump to these tactics before they have a strategic plan in place. So I'm glad we started with the positive in this conversation. But let's go back to the beginning of what we were going to talk about today, which is the difference between somebody who owns the tools for graphic design, a guy who's got a copy of Photoshop, took a couple online classes, maybe knows Illustrator, and now puts up their shingle saying, I'm a graphic designer. What background should people be looking for in a graphic designer just from the get-go? I know I need to make something beautiful. Who do I reach out to, and how do I sort through and find that guy?
I think that's a great question, Andrew, because I think that challenge that you've referenced came about and was created in the early 90s when the introduction of desktop publishing really came about, not only for the side of Mac, but also for PC. And the first thing I would say when someone's looking for a qualified graphic designer is the basis of what is their background education. Sure. I myself have been doing this for over 30 years. And I went ahead and made sure when I had decided that this was something I was passionate about and was my desired career path, I researched a lot of colleges and based on what their programs were to see which one was going to be the best fit for me for what I was interested in doing. And I found a great college here in Cincinnati. And they basically, when I graduated with a degree in graphic design and creative art direction. So I think that's key. I think that you need to ask and find out what their educational background is. Second, you want to find out what level of experience do they have? How long have they actually been doing graphic design? And I'm not saying you need to find someone with my level of experience or expertise. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I think it helps, but I think it's key that the individual that you're talking to and looking at has at least been out in the marketplace for a few years, whether it's working for another company, whether it's working for other clients, and they have some background beyond the college education. Third, and I think it's key in this day and age, it's important, is you want to see their work. You want to see they should have an online portfolio to share with you as a potential client so that you can get an example to see what the quality of their work is.
Gotcha. You know, something that I've always found interesting when I'm interviewing graphic designers, they'll show me, like they'll have a website with all of these supposed companies that they've worked with, as if those were their direct clients. Or they'll show me a portfolio of work that they've done. When you start asking the questions, did you do this on your own? Were you part of the team? And many times there's a little bit of deception with the guys that don't have the level of experience. How often do you encounter that when you're interviewing people to work on projects with you? It seems like, for example, almost everyone I know from Cincinnati has Procter & Gamble as a client. And we know Procter & Gamble doesn't use all of those people. What's your experience been with how do you sort through, what are the questions we should be asking when people show their portfolios to know what their level of engagement was on that project?
Another great question.
I hope so.
And interestingly enough, Brandosity has some experience in working with Procter & Gamble, but it's not direct client experience. And we share that with our clients up front. Here are some examples of some work that's been developed, but it's clearly identified, A, what our role was in the development of that work, and B, who we were developing that work in association with. Yeah. My experience has been when I sit down, first off, I think any good graphic designer is going to be able to share through their portfolio what level of involvement in the project that they had. We certainly do that with our clients. Number two, the next question I ask if that information hasn't been provided when I'm interviewing, because Brandosity is a virtual agency. So therefore, the support resources that we utilize, we end up doing on a contract basis, so that we can ebb and flow or grow and reduce depending on the client responsibility. Sure. So I do a fair amount of interviewing with graphic designers, strategists, copywriters. And as I look through their portfolio, I evaluate it for the level of quality creative that's in there. And then number two, I also start to ask those questions. What role did you play in this? Yeah. Please help me understand. And frankly, the one thing that I think is important is you don't want to necessarily rule out a design resource simply because they may have had more of a team role. Because frankly, depending on what your necessities are, they could do some great upfront work, but you also want them to be a team player. Yeah, there's, to me, the most important part when I'm dealing with a graphic designer, and I've come across this a lot of times, or with companies when we're working with a graphic designer for one of our clients, is this ability to truly understand all of the aspects of the brand as it's been created and designing to that brand, as opposed to a graphic designer that just wants to give you what they think looks cool. Or a company where the owner happens to be into, I don't know, medieval times and knights in shining armor, but the brand has nothing to do with that. But anything you present to them is more to their personal aesthetic rather than the strategy. How much of your experience has been in that realm, and how do you deal with a client that is more interested in what looks cool than what really meets their branding story? Extremely frequently. I think the one thing that is starting, which is I'm very excited about to see happening. I think organizations and companies, and let me just do this as a rough idea. I would say 90 to 95% of most companies that are out there have never really considered graphic design, marketing, or branding from a strategic perspective. And I think that, obviously bigger organizations like Procter & Gamble, like Coca-Cola, like Apple, and people all the time love to bring those organizations up as wonderful examples of branding. And the reason why they're great examples of branding is because they started out to have a better understanding of what their strategic objectives were for their creative initiatives. Mm-hmm. What I'm seeing now in the marketplace, especially within the last probably 10 years, is companies are starting to recognize that there's a need for both sides of that coin. They want great creative, but they're starting to understand that there is a strategic need in regards to having a better understanding about how to meet that creative challenge. Now, they recognize that, but sometimes, and certainly we run into this challenge all the time with Brandosity because of some of the organizations we partner with, there is a really strong need to help educate.
Absolutely.
And we go through that educational process. But let me go ahead and emphasize this also. You've heard the term. Sometimes you can lead a horse to water, but you can't necessarily make them drink.
Yep.
And so at some point, being a good steward in business, you have to try to work on finding happy medium. And ultimately you become the brand steward. So you try your best to be able to meet all of those business goals and objectives to satisfy the client's perceived creative ownership, along with what you've been able to find out from a strategic standpoint of view.
Yeah, one of the common things I'm seeing people and having conversations with business owners is why would I pay top dollar these guys here? I can go on to Upworks, I can go on to Fiverr and find a guy. I want to develop a brand. This guy can make the logo for me. And you ask, well, what do you think a brand is? And they think it's the logo. Whereas when you really dig into these projects, the logo tends to be the last thing after that branding initiative happens. So, whether you're involved at that level, I advocate that when I know who the graphic designer is going to be for a project, that they participate at certain parts of the branding strategy and the strategic build so that they're fully versed on all of the intent rather than having to then present the brand to the designer. Is it pretty common for you these days when it's not a Brandosity client and you've been brought in to be involved in that branding process? Or do you typically end up having to have it all explained to you after the fact and try to make good with it?
I find it's on both sides. Interestingly enough, before it would have been, there was never any strategic development at all. What I'm finding now is there are a mix of clients. Just recently, we're in a really big new business push right now, just to open up some new opportunities and new doors. And so therefore, that's a lot of potential meetings. And it was very interesting because the client that we sat down, a potential client that we sat down and talked about going through a branding process. And, they started out, weren't concerned with their brand. Then obviously, as the company grew, they recognized that there was some need for the brand. And to them, you're absolutely correct. Their perception of the brand was, well, we redid the logo and we changed the website and we did, all the tactical things. But now what they're doing is they're moving into that third phase of growth. And it's not that the primary brand mark is wrong. What they're starting to recognize is that they have a different type of customer that they want to pursue.
Yes.
And that customer is more sophisticated. So therefore, the brand needs to feel more sophisticated. So the one thing that we're talking about with them is saying, let's revisit what I like to call their secondary and tertiary brand elements. And what that means is that could be photography, that could be graphic design elements that are connected with your brand, that could be color palettes, that could be typography styles. And then the third thing, and those are all second and tertiary visual brands. But then the second thing is how do you want your brand to be perceived from a content standpoint of view or a voice of the brand? Because right now they're like, we're great software. That's great. You now have 3 other competitors you didn't have 2 years ago.
Yep.
They have great software too. And that's not resonating with their audience. So what's your voice of your brand? And I think that's really important. I mean, that was kind of a key component when one of the primary founding partners of Brandosity and I came together was there was a strong divide between what people perceive as branding firms and advertising agencies.
Yes.
And to define that is branding firms believe that everything about the brand is visual. Ad agencies believe that everything is about the big idea, the golden nugget in regards to how to have people hooked to the brand. Brandosity's philosophy, besides being a strategically based development organization, was in all actuality, brands should be represented by both. So they should be represented by, once you strategically understand the goals of the brand, the next thing is you start to develop what the visual assets are. And then third and finally, you understand what that unique point of interest and difference is between your competitors and that brand. And you learn how to communicate that through the voice of the brand.
Yeah.
So when you talk about that, that's definitely something that has always been very much present in the consumer space, but now I'm starting to see it permeate out into other business spaces that traditionally haven't thought that way.
Yeah, and projects that we've worked on over the time that we've known each other have always been in that concept of developing a brand that is so recognizable that when people see it, they feel at home. They know that that's who they are, for the purpose of creating that advocacy of the brand by the people who've done business with the company. So, you know, when I think about all of the different projects that we've done together and how that look, the feel, all the things that you've just described, the color palette, even sounds that we've added in as part of what does the brand sound like, what does it feel like, almost what does it smell like, the five senses involvement, but how after a person buys or engages or does business, whether it's a single purchase or a continuing relationship, how does that inspire them to go tell the world how much they love that brand? And I think that's what's missing between a true professional design firm getting involved in that process than just farming it out to some guy with some tools in their shop.
Absolutely. And I think the other challenge, which we haven't touched on, was the growth of digital communication. Yep. Because that before, influencers were drawn into and made advocates of the brand through direct mail, marketing materials, unique marketing materials that came across their desk. And not to say that those things still don't have a point of interest, but what's happened is the growth of the digital space, starting in about 2005 and continuing, has changed the landscape a little bit. Unfortunately, like anything else, like any new tactical initiative, everybody jumped on the bandwagon with that, and everything became about how to figure out how to be an influencer in that space. And that became 90% of the drive. And now, which I'm grateful to see, that I think is starting to realign itself again. And a great example of that was the introduction of TV into mainstream marketing in the 60s.
Okay.
Every company saw that medium as, I don't care what I do, I can sell shovels and I need a TV commercial. Mm-hmm. That isn't necessarily relevant. And the digital space, creating influencers through such social media platforms as Facebook and Twitter, the business platform LinkedIn, immediately said, this is where we need to be, without really understanding, well, why are you there? What are you doing? What are you saying? And so I'm grateful to see within the last year or two that a lot of that is starting to realign itself, much like TV did, where it's a part of a tactical application to help build influencers and help promote and market your organization.
Yeah.
But it's a great example of, when you talked about that, sound, voice. How do you want to communicate? How do you want your brand to be perceived? Are you a thought leader? Are you an expert? Are you a manufacturer with excellent materials? What are you? So your voice communicates that.
Yep. And the beauty of it is, if you're a company who's telling people, I'm a thought leader, I'm an influencer, all those kinds of things, people don't take it for real. The beauty of a brilliant strategy properly implemented with the proper design and otherwise, the audience gets to decide that you're a thought leader and you're an advocate, or you're a just lost my word. But that's never happened to me before. More than
brilliance gets lost at times.
No, but I mean, if people are saying you're an influencer and people are saying that guy's a thought leader, those are advocates for your brand. If you're saying it, you're just a guy pounding your chest or otherwise, and it's not as authentic. So the beauty of having the right team is that the world will begin to believe that you are that and advocate for it and let people know. At the end of the
Absolutely.
day, we want people to be aware of what we do and what we sell. We want them to engage and learn about it. We want them to buy it. We want them to love it and tell the world and be advocates for our brand. So that's really the path. And the challenge I see the most when 90% of the business that we get in our organization are people that have been burned by those who don't have those types of situations. They've been either talking to someone who doesn't understand branding or somebody who decided to shoehorn them into all of the expensive stuff they can provide in the tactical world without actually building a strategy. So, this idea of jumping to design before strategy, or jumping, this guy knows how to make GIFs that or GIFs, or however you want to pronounce it, that move around on your screen and get people's attention. That's a tactic. It may not work, and it may not fit what your actual intention was in the first place.
Absolutely. And in the industry, I like to call that creative for creative's sake.
Yep, that's a great way of putting it. So Burns, we're kind of running low on time here. I got to ask you what I ask everybody. If what question didn't I ask you that I should have, that the audience should know about graphic design and designing to a strategy as opposed to creative for creative's sake?
First off, I think one question I did want to bring up was, or at least a point.
Sure.
The challenge of finding the right graphic design fit. The one thing that I think Brandosity's success has been based on is development of relationships. We certainly do have a new business initiative, but I can tell you right now, the initiative for new business is about, and Brandosity has made some changes. We certainly have a strategic creative officer, and we also have a new business development person that we brought on just a month or so ago. And the big part of that was, and the reason why we felt it would be a good fit is because of the level of clientele that they have. The one thing that I think is key is when you're looking for a new resource, whether it be for branding, graphic design, web development, any of those things, go out and ask a respected business friend. Because the best thing to be able to do is refer someone that they know that they've done business with and were impressed by the way that they handled their business. Because I can guarantee you the success of finding the right resource goes up dramatically.
Yeah, checking references, especially with creative teams and in our market space, is absolutely the key to finding that right person. If you're not checking references, you're swimming not knowing if there's sharks in the water.
Or there's blood and there are sharks in the water.
That's a whole other level of crazy. So, well, I want to thank you again for coming on today. This was a really interesting conversation. How can my audience find you if they wanted to ask you some questions or know more about strategic graphic design? Oh,
absolutely. You can certainly go to our website, which is Brandosity. It's BRANDOCITY.com. And our email address is there. And also, if you'd like to see some samples of our work, you can link to our online portfolio and see some of the clientele we've done business with. Yeah. Also, if you'd like to correspond.
All of this is going to be on the screen so that folks will be able to see it, and it'll be in the comments so they can click on it and find you that way too.
Excellent. Of course, if you'd like to email me directly, my direct email address is bbrady, BBRADY @brandosity.com. Or you can certainly connect with me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I look forward to continuing to do great work with you for the next, 50, 60 years, if we make it.
Sometimes you understand that us creative people aren't measured in years. We're measured in dog years. So I don't know if you've got that long.
I thought you were measured in pixels. Thanks again. Have a great one.
Andrew, thank you. Have a great day.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Fangle Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand.